Welcome back to another episode of Fearless Journeys. I'm your host, Steve Johnson. Today we have an important, timely topic to discuss: addiction and recovery in college-age students. College can be an exciting time, but it can also come with its own set of challenges, including the temptation to use substances and the struggle to overcome addiction. Fortunately, we have an incredible expert with us today to shed some light on this issue, Kayla Napper. Kayla currently works with Alberta Health Services and is here part-time helping us with some of our students.
Hi, thanks for having me today.
Okay, Kayla, tell us a little bit about yourself. What's, your history?
Okay, well, I am currently in my 12th year as an addictions counselor, all with Alberta Health Services. I completed my Bachelor of Health Sciences in addictions counseling through the U of L. And from there, I started my career working at the Lander Residential Treatment Center in Claresholm, where I worked for 8 years. After that, I have moved to Lethbridge to the outpatient clinic, and I've been there ever since. But I've also had the privilege to work at a couple other locations as well. I spent some time at South Country, some time with the Youth Residential Treatment Center, Woods Homes, as well as the Lethbridge Recovery Center Medical Detox at the hospital.
Oh, that's quite extensive. You've got lots of recovery experience.
Yes.
Which is great. I think it's good information, having that such wide range background that you have. I think it'll be really interesting what we have today.
Yeah, it's been a diverse enough career that I've had the ability to see a lot of the different angles, both, professionally and personally. And I think that that has helped a lot. Yeah.
Absolutely. So to start out then, Kayla, could you tell our listeners why addiction is, particularly relevant to college-age students?
College is such an interesting time of, spreading our own wings and kind of setting off on our own and learning, what fits for us and what doesn't fit for us, and, creating our own understanding of the world around us. And I think that, addiction can become, sadly, an opportunity that can occur in those early college years because, hey, maybe we haven't been exposed to this, a party lifestyle or these different substances. Maybe we're from smaller towns or from other places and we're coming together and creating new friendships and new relationships. It's also probably one of the hardest time periods in a lot of people's lives as they're realizing the stress load has grown in huge magnitudes from, high school years to college years, where suddenly having to balance budgets and live on our own and cook and take care of ourselves and, see the world in much larger viewpoints. So sometimes those coping strategies that we had when we were younger, they're just not keeping up anymore. And so the opportunity for substance to step in as, a newfound coping strategy, maybe it's our new way that we socialize with others, and all of a sudden it can get out of hand rather quickly. I see a lot of folks that their origin years of their addiction were in those college, university years when we're kind of experimenting with who we are. It's also sometimes a time where our mental health takes a bit more of a hit. Maybe we notice more symptoms around our mental health, or maybe we have new diagnoses as the stressors increase in our lives. And sadly, addiction fits beautifully in there as a coping strategy for that. So I think college age students, college time period in our life can be, both a beautiful time of discovery, but it can also introduce some not so awesome things into our lives.
So you've got that kind of newfound freedom coming to a place where you've not experienced it, like you said. And then you've got all those stressors of school, and you kind of know that high school is a different ballgame than college, right?
Totally. Yeah. And it's, all of a sudden that world becomes an adult viewpoint, right? And sometimes we still feel like we're, teens ourselves in an adult world. And so how do we learn to navigate that? And, it can be a whole new journey.
And I think it's important to understand too, we have students, typically the age is 18 to 25 for college students, but we do have mature students as well. And how does that, how does addiction play in that role? Do we see more mature students coming to college with addiction, or are we thinking maybe the younger students are coming more often with addiction?
I've worked with mature students over time who have come back to college in their recovery is often where I've seen, maybe an addiction created or started off early in their lives. They've maybe made some choices to get sober or to change up their lifestyle. And as part of that, they're, it's time for a new career. I think I'm going to go back to school. So when I have worked with mature students in the past, I've seen college be stressful in how do I maintain a recovery while also going back to school, while maybe also already having kids, maybe spouses and, other family dynamics that are going on that add extra stressors. I also wonder too, as a mature student, is there any inclination or peer pressure towards joining in on some of that more party culture to fit in with my peers if I am maybe the only mature student in my program? So I think it can come at us from so many different angles, right? So many different reasons or rationales to get into substance use, right?
Mm-hmm. And definitely, like you mentioned, the stressors are, regardless if you're coming right from high school into college or you're coming right from a career into a different career, there's still that huge stressor there, and sometimes more for mature students. Eh?
For sure. Fear of failure is huge, right?
Yeah.
It's, can I do this? Is this the right time? Am I making the right choice? Does this fit for me?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Awesome. Good insights. So, Kayla, in your opinion, what role does early education and prevention play in addressing these addiction issues, especially, among our college students?
Honestly, I think that early intervention can be everything when it comes to addressing addiction issues. Why not, address things before they get kind of out of hand? And I think early education can come in so many different forms, right? I think some of the early education is realizing that addiction is not, just the person under the bridge with the brown bag drinking, right? It's so much more than that. It's your working professionals that maybe, are indulging a little bit more in the evenings or weekends, what have you. So some of the early education is destigmatizing.
Right.
Some of that early education is just around basic coping skills. These are the things you're going to face. This is what it might feel like. This is what anxiety looks like. This is what depression looks like. This is what isolation looks like. And here are some other alternative coping strategies that maybe you can give it a try.
Mm-hmm.
The other area of early intervention is around mental health, right? I think especially, here at Lethbridge College, we have a beautiful international population here. And for some folks, some of that early intervention is, hey, these are some of the substances that we have here. These are some of the things you may see. These are some of the ways that, trauma may be showing up now that you're here in a different culture, different population, what have you. And these are some of the things you might notice if you're struggling. This is where you can get supports, right? Because sometimes early intervention is also, I don't know where to go for help.
Right.
What's out there for me now, right? My parents used to handle this for me. Now what?
So nobody knows what to do, right?
Right. Yeah. So I think early education and prevention can be paramount in eliminating, a lot of those longer term, larger consequences that can come from substance use.
Mm-hmm. So in regards to that, I know, you mentioned international students. I think along with that is we have different cultural beliefs around that. So early education regarding cultural beliefs, how do you see that happening?
Well, and I think that as professionals, that's also on us too, right? To, be adjusting our practices along with varying cultural beliefs and perspectives, because that is a big move for a lot of folks to come from a culture where maybe mental health and addiction and seeking support is not talked about or not normalized. And all of a sudden you come somewhere and these strangers are saying, it's okay, you can trust us. Let's talk about your feelings. And so, learning to kind of meet people where they're at and showing in a safe way that it is okay to talk about mental health here and it is okay to reach out for support. And we recognize that everybody struggles in different ways, you and I both, right? And how do we meet people where they're at, and offer that trust and offer that support without creating such a huge difference from what they're maybe familiar with or used to?
Yeah, exactly. There are definitely some cultures that don't believe in mental health even. So to come in and say, addiction is mental health, sometimes it's hard to capture, right? For sure. But they can understand drinking too much, or they can understand using too much.
Yeah. Sometimes it's just the provision of the definition, right? Explaining we have this certain definition of what addiction is versus what mental health is and versus what we believe we're doing at home, right? And, when we share that definition is actually really broad and filled with a lot of gray areas. And there's, a lot of different ways that addiction can present for different folks, but that doesn't mean it's not addiction.
Yeah.
And just helping to paint that picture can be a really big thing for folks.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So in regards to this early intervention and early education piece of it, we've got maybe peer-to-peer stuff that might be helpful, or how does the college then look at it as an institution? How do we create that or foster that healthy campus around addiction and mental health? Do you have any thoughts on that?
It's actually been really interesting for me as I've, started to integrate more into the college campus and lifestyle and faculty here. And I know I view things from an addictions lens, and so I maybe notice things. But in a lot of campuses, there is a lot of advertisement around partying opportunities, drinking opportunities, bars on site, activities and events held in the campus bars and things, signs up at different places that depict substance use. And I think as a college or a university or any campus along those lines, it's important to not, it's fine to promote those things, but to also equally promote safe, sober, supported, harm reduction based events as well too. So, if we have a drinking event, do we also have non-alcoholic options available, right? Is that just as readily available as the alcoholic options? Are we presenting it in a way, where it's not tucked away in a corner that somebody kind of maybe feels ashamed to go and get that? Is it out front and present too? And do we have the mocktails available? I think also allowing for groups to occur on campus, right? That peer support you mentioned. Best practice says that group-based treatment is the best method of treatment for addiction. So if I'm looking at a college campus and what can they do, having space and opportunity and availability of peer-based groups where we can seek that support. Maybe there's even a welcoming of 12-step communities onto campus as well,
Right,
too.
yeah.
Having that available, having that advertised for students as well as faculty. I think sometimes it can be difficult as faculty to, I'm supposed to be a leader, I'm supposed to be a teacher, I'm supposed to be the professional here, but maybe I'm also struggling in my own life.
Yeah.
And it'd be nice to be able to, have that stigma removed here where it's okay to be in recovery. It's okay to be struggling here.
So normalizing recovery quite a bit, right?
Yeah. Getting into classrooms too, right? Talking to students and creating that up. They're there anyways to learn, right? So how can we get in there and create that opportunity to learn about not only the subject matter that they've selected, but also, here are some warning signs, here's some thoughts around addiction. This is what we have available, so that it's not students having to seek it out all the time. Maybe the information is brought to them as well.
Yeah. Definitely good information. And I think in Lethbridge College here anyways, our Lethbridge College Student Association does a really good job in promoting some of these events where, they have access to non-alcoholic beverages and promoting healthy living and healthy responses. So I think our college is actually doing pretty good.
Yeah.
Now, you and me are definitely involved in a recovery group, which hasn't been greatly successful now.
Shameless plug.
Right? Yeah, shameless plug. But definitely those group, like I said, best practice, peer-to-peer support is very important. And so I think the more stigma we can combat around addiction and recovery, I think we'll probably see more and more of an uptake.
For sure. I've had the opportunity to participate in a few of the different, festivals or fairs or days here. I loved seeing on the Stress Less days that we had a mocktail bar like that. And I watched students come and just love that. I dream of, that the recovery group, having this beautiful community that they also then run booths at other events and they, peer-to-peer draw folks in, right? Or the hot chocolate cart that went around. I love seeing that. That just makes my heart happy to see that it's talked about. It's on the forefront, right?
So could you now share with us some of those warning signs that parents or friends or the students themselves might look for when we're thinking addiction and those responses from addiction?
Well, I think, when we're taking a look at warning signs, I think there is there's a benefit to kind of taking a look at the definition of addiction as well too, right? Addiction being, a chronic condition that, involves a preoccupation with a substance use for a particular reason. Substance or behavior, I should be mentioning as well here.
Right, yeah, absolutely.
We have our process addictions as well as our substance-based addictions. And use of that substance, despite or in spite rather the negative consequences. So for folks trying to determine, do I have a problem here? I think it's taking a look at, how many of my normal values or the normal things that I love and care about in my life, have they slid down, right? Has their priority spot dropped and has substance slid up higher? Am I modifying my lifestyle in order to allow for more opportunities for substance to be used? When we take a look at the stages of addiction, we have abstention, of course, not using. We have experimentation, which for the most part, most individuals have experienced experimentation where, we're giving it a try, seeing what it can do. We start to then slide more into social use, right? Which is where we're kind of modifying our day to day. We're hanging out with folks that we know do the same things, we're hanging out with the classmates that like to go for a beer and wings after class versus those that go to the gym. So we're modifying our existence in order to allow for that. Then we start to slide ourselves into a place of abuse, right? And when we slide into abuse, this is where, if you've started to reach to your substance or to your behavior for a particular reason, I know when I smoke, I can sleep. I'm anxious for this test. If I just have this substance, this drink, this hit, I'll do better. I'll be okay. I'll calm down. From there, we then slide into addiction, which is where we may be seeking that positive benefit, but we're no longer receiving it. Or if we are, it's barely present.
Yeah.
And we're experiencing those negative consequences as per our use. Maybe our finances are, we're skipping bill payments to afford substance.
Right.
We're not showing up to school in the mornings. We're mixing work shifts. Maybe we're noticing our grades are dropping. We're isolating a bit more. Personal self-care, your hygiene, your nutrition, sleep, either sleeping all the time or not sleeping at all. If we're noticing any of those things occurring, I'd say those would be some opportunities for some reflection. As for friends and family, major personality changes. If you notice in your loved one that they're, the person you knew it doesn't appear to be there anymore, or things that they used to love, they're no longer participating in. If they're used to be really social, now they're really isolated. If they're no longer checking in,
right?
Those are some opportunities to open up a dialogue with your loved one and say, "Hey, I've noticed A, B, and C. Can we talk about it?"
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. One thing we know in addiction recovery is the most powerful person to notice needs to be ourselves.
Yeah,
right?
That makes sense.
None of us like to receive that feedback from others of, hey, I think there's a problem here. So there's huge, huge power and huge motivation that can come from when we notice it ourselves and we reach that point of acceptance.
So really looking at some of that functionality in your life is decreased. And, there's that expression that the opposite of addiction is connection. So would you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah. So for friends and family, especially, I run a friends and family group through Alberta Health Services. And that is one of the concepts that we talk the most about is, sometimes the old tough love can be the old recommended approach to addiction recovery. Oh, cut them off and, they'll notice they've made a loss and they'll come crawling back. And really, a lot of times that cutoff pushes folks farther away. And if the opposite of addiction is connection, then we want to show up for folks in the place of connection when they're doing okay, or we want to reinforce the things that they are doing that are healthy. So say you've got somebody in your life who's maybe drinking too much on the weekends, but you also know they like to go for a walk. Well, if the opposite of addiction is connection, then maybe offering them, hey, I'm not willing to go out drinking with you anymore. However, if you'd like to go for a walk, give me a call, right? We call that the invitation to change model.
Okay.
And so, we promote and we show our presence in the positive moments.
Right.
If you want some help grocery shopping, I'd love to go with you. If you want to study, let's get together. Want to go for a walk? I'm there. I'm not willing to drink with you, though. I'm not willing to go out and party with you. I'm not willing to offer money to support your substance. I'm not willing to save you from your professors who are maybe upset with you or help you with your homework because you're too far behind. That's your consequence. But I'm totally going to be there for you in connection.
Yeah, and I think that's very important, especially with the students that we talk to and the students that we come across, is who is your biggest supporter? Can we go back? Because like you said, students who are in addiction, they're often socially withdrawing. So if we can reestablish some of those connections, I think is a wonderful thing.
Yeah, and it helps to reinforce to the person that, they're not bad. There is nothing wrong with them as a person. There's, nothing to be ashamed of. It's simply a maladaptive coping strategy, really. And I don't know that any of us can sit here and say we've never, ever had a maladaptive coping strategy in any way, shape, right?
Exactly.
One happens to be overworking. One is, working out too much. One is eating too many chips. One is drinking too much. Who's to say there's any difference in severity, right? One just kind of causes more negative consequences sometimes. So, when we can be there for folks and show you are still loved. I may not love what you're doing, but I love you.
Right.
And I can be there for you in that support.
Yeah, that's great to hear, especially when you're in that recovery or in that addiction stage, either or. It's a wonderful thing to hear. Now, you mentioned before, we were talking about, obviously, those signs and symptoms, but you mentioned we oftentimes think addiction as substance use or abuse, right? But there's that behavioral addiction. So do we see any difference between the behavioral type of addiction compared to a substance use addiction?
Sometimes we get away with it longer, I suppose, in regards to the behavioral or process-based addiction. Substance or ingested-based addiction often shows itself a lot sooner, right? We see physical negative consequences earlier. Often financial consequences are huge too. But if we take a look at, our video gaming addiction, our gambling, our pornography, sex addiction, things like that, sometimes folks can hide that a little bit longer in isolation, which sometimes causes the consequences to be bigger by the time the person actually comes forward with, hey, I think I have an issue here, right? I would wonder a little bit too with how technology-based our education system is now. Does that promote a larger opportunity for, I'm already on my computer doing my schoolwork, so I'm playing a little bit of, poker here and there. Oh, that's getting a little bit more. Oh, I'm diving in deeper. Maybe the video gaming is there too. So yeah, there is a little bit of a difference. The treatment per se is approximately the same.
Okay.
It does pose a little bit more complexity when we're taking a look at the treatment. With some substances, abstinence is in theory best, but for some things, if there's any, food eating addiction or food concerns or sex-based addictions, abstinence is not exactly the recommended practice.
Right.
So, we do sometimes treat things a little bit differently. However, the overall removal of stigma, the removal of shame, the importance of connection, the importance of vulnerability and sharing, would be the same across.
Yeah. Combating some of that negative self-talk.
Huge.
When we're dealing with, how we personally respond to how we feel we're in addiction.
Oh, totally. Yeah. We can be our own, AA talks about the 1,000-pound phone, right? And I think that we are often our biggest barrier to the supports that we need out of that self-talk and that shame, right?
Yeah.
We catastrophize how bad it is in our own view and what others are going to think of us before we've even tested that theory.
So it's really good to be aware of those signs, but let's talk about recovery now. So can you tell us about the steps students can take if they know someone is struggling with addiction or if they know they are struggling with addiction?
I think there's a few, and this is where, it can get really confusing to people. Where do I go? What do I do here? Because I think there's a few different avenues to recovery per se, or to, get that support. I think it's important to remember that recovery is not just about abstinence-based treatment. However, that is an option and one of the roads that can be taken. So as for steps, I think one of the first things is tattling on ourselves, right? Reaching out to somebody that we feel safe to start with, right? If you're, here at the college, is it the wellness team? Can you chat with one of the nurses or one of the student support specialists? Like, where do I go from here? Maybe it's even a trusted professor. What supports are available to me here on campus? It can also be things like we have a telephone intake service, Access South, which allows you to get connected to Alberta Health Services, Addictions and Mental Health, as well as other community agencies. So maybe it's a phone call to Access South to say, hey, this is me. This is what I'm going through. This is what I'm dealing with. What do you suggest? Where do I go from here?
Right.
And we also have a wonderful 12-step community within Lethbridge. And, maybe it's taking a Google search to see what meetings are available out there. Mm-hmm. But I do think the first step is often tattling on ourselves and reaching out to someone who we already trust. It doesn't need to be somebody new.
Yeah, those supporters that, those big supporters.
Maybe it's even a family doctor, right? Maybe it's someone from church. Maybe it's a peer here that maybe you believe they might have a similar experience. But I think, one of the first steps is breaking that silence, right? Shame grows in silence. And so when we shatter that, we start the opportunity, right? For those that are, maybe the consequences are more severe, maybe there's health impacts, maybe there's mental health impacts going on right now. Maybe the route will be something like detox and treatment, right? We do have a few different detox centers around here, medically supported as well as non-medical, as well as a multitude of different treatment centers and approaches out there, and finding a professional to help you analyze which one best fits for you. Right? How will that work with your school programming as well too? Reaching out to your academic advisors as well. Mm-hmm. So the first step is really, any first step is the right first step.
Right. Okay. That makes sense. Yep.
Yeah. But, moving forward in any way, shape or form, we often talk about just do the next right thing.
Right.
If that's first step is, hi, I think I need something, but I don't know where to go. Mm-hmm. Amazing. Great first step.
Yeah. And then, like you said, talking to a professional, counselor, therapist, doctor, nurse, trying to look at what those supports are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it can be a confusing web, right? So bringing a professional onto your team and onto your network is an incredible support, because they can help to decode what all these different supports are out there for, and where you'd get, the best treatment for this, that, or the other, versus you having to figure it out on your own while also struggling. Yeah. That's a lot. So, having that kind of your conductor, your guide, to kind of your Sherpa per se, to walk you through that recovery and to show the different options available. Mm-hmm.
So really having a supportive environment is a great thing. Having those peer-to-peer groups that we talked about can be very supportive in recovery, definitely. What about the issue about triggers? In regard to our recovery, and if we know somebody who is working towards the recovery, how do we look at reducing triggers that keep us from relapsing?
Well, each person's approach to recovery needs to be specific to their reasons or their background behind the creation or the origin of their addiction. So what I mean by that is, I may use because I struggle with uncomfortable emotions. You may use because you've got extensive trauma. Someone else may use because they're feeling insecure and nervous in peer groups. Right. So I think when it comes to removing triggers, we need to take a look at what purpose is this substance serving in my life right now? What is this giving me? And sometimes that can be a kind of a difficult thing to analyze, because when we ask folks, what do you get from your substance use? Well, nothing. That's why I'm here to see you. I need help. It's not doing anything for me. Right. But as humans, we do all things for a reason. The benefit may not be healthy, but it's definitely present, right? So taking a look at what am I getting from my substance, and therefore, what are going to be the people, places, and things where I may be inclined to want to use my substance? Is it a peer group that I maybe need to start spending less time with or different time with? Right. Is my stress the trigger? And therefore, how can I reduce my stress? What learning strategies are available to me? What is it? Financial stress? Who can I reach out to help better guide my budgeting, or what other community options are available to me? If it's maybe your current living situation, is there things within your home that need to change or need to shift, right? If there's alcohol always available in your home, or maybe you're living with folks who also use, is it time to make a change there, right?
Or even taking the TV and the video game system out of your room and putting it somewhere more public so that people are aware of how much you're using, right?
Harm reduction is an amazing first step, right, for a lot of folks when they come to journeying towards recovery, right, is, okay, how can I even just cut back on how much am I video gaming now just during certain times of the day out in the living room, right? Am I only consuming at social events rather than alone and at home? Am I no longer going to bars and pubs, but I'll still go to restaurants? How do I find that balance between, still living my life, but also reducing my triggers, right?
And we know that recovery is kind of a journey, individual journey for everybody, right? Like you mentioned. And it's not always linear, right? So how would you explain that cycle of recovery?
I would say rarely, if ever, linear, I think would be the definition that I would use. What we know in recovery is that often when we are forced or compelled to do something, our willingness or our motivation is low. And so finding that individual buy-in and the reasoning and the benefit as to why I want this for me. Why is this important to me? Why are my values taking a hit through addiction? And what are my values that I'm going to use to help bring me back? We see folks move through what we call the stages of change. We have pre-contemplation. I'm not even thinking about it yet. I'm not even considering it. Not even on my radar. We have contemplation where something has sparked a little part of you that's going, there might be an issue here, or other people seem to think I have an issue. So maybe there is one. I don't know. So we're starting to think about it, right? We're maybe not totally sold, but we're contemplating the idea, right? Then we move into action. Okay. And action is really any forward direction, right? Whether that be harm reduction approach, whether that be abstinence based, whether that be just simply gaining more knowledge and understanding and developing that knowledge base before I make a decision on what goal I'm going to set. That's our action based. Okay. Then we have our maintenance stages where we've established a bit of a system and a plan in our recovery, and we're working it. Right? We're going to our meetings, we're checking in with our counselors, we are attending our classes, we're connecting with family, we're participating in hobbies, because recovery is about so much more than just substance use, right?
It is.
It's a single piece of the pie, right? We have our physical health, our emotional health, our mental health, spiritual health, our education, our legal health, our financial health, our career-based health, family, friends, and all of those areas require improvement when we're taking a look at recovery. Abstinence is when we're not using. Recovery is when we're not using and improving our life and going back and fixing some of those initial issues or the initial problems or those gaps in knowledge that led to the creation of the substance use issue in the first place. So recovery is about an improved lifestyle, not just substance.
Yeah, and going away from that maladaptive coping to coping strategies that will take us into that healthy lifestyle. Yeah.
Respecting our mental health as part of our health, right? And, we eat well, we take our vitamins, but when was the last time we did some daily journaling to check in with ourselves, or participated in a meditation, or had a nap because you needed one, right? Those things are all just as curative as, a vitamin every day.
So if I'm a college student in addiction or in recovery, how would you as a friend or a parent support me? What would be some of the key things that would help me?
Well, I think sometimes that initial step to connection is really scary. And so if I'm a friend, maybe I can offer to go with someone to wellness services, to academic advising or trusted professor. Maybe I'll go with you to start that process and asking for help. Maybe I'm also helping to create more opportunities for alternative ways of coping, right? Maybe we're finding things we can do together like disc golf or yoga or, different clubs that we can join. So maybe I'm creating different available options to you. If I'm family, maybe I am creating more opportunity to have that touch base, to have that home grounding of this is still your root, right? This is still, you may be a college student, life may be stressful, exams are hard, there's a lot of big things going on, life is getting more expensive, but hey, you always have home here, right? And connection,
and that encouragement piece.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with an encouraging challenge as well too. Hey, these are some major formative years for you. I'm noticing this. I'm worried for this. Where do you see this trajectory taking you? How can we not waste the work you're putting in here in college? You're doing a lot of big work. How do we grow and change so that we're not wasting these years, right?
Yeah.
And setting ourselves at risk.
So in a sense, being an encouragement in any way to that person, non-judgmental, and the role of education, not specifically for somebody in addiction or recovery, but the role of education to those supports as well, I think is important. Totally.
That was, another thing I wanted to mention too, is that if you have someone in your life, a loved one of any form, whether that be a family member, a friend, who you're concerned about, taking the time for yourself to go and better learn about what is addiction, what is recovery, what is mental health. We have, their shameless plug, we have a group that we run through AHS, Friends and Family of Addiction. And the power that I see individuals gain when that compassionate and empathetic connection occurs for them, and they realize what their loved one is actually going through, what addiction is actually like. Because not only are we breaking the stigma for those in addiction, we also need to shatter the stigma for those supporting someone in addiction.
Right.
It's not this big demon that needs to be held in the corner kind of thing. No, this is something that we can all face together from that non-judgmental approach, as well as, hey, open communication. What do you need? This is what I can provide. Are you open to that? If we're asking our loved ones to be vulnerable and to reach out to us for honest and open support, we need to be willing to meet them on the same playing field with vulnerability and open and honest communication, and be humble in that approach with them, because we may have thoughts and theories on what we think they need for support, and we might be very wrong on what they actually need for support, right? Yeah. So gaining that knowledge base for yourself is huge. And
then looking at boundaries as well, how are we enabling our loved one? Are we creating those boundaries that we can actually be more supportive?
Yeah. Sometimes our best laid plans are causing a lot of harm, right?
Yeah, so,
absolutely. Are we enabling? Have we been enabling? Are we living in a bit of a codependent relationship with this person? Are there boundaries that we need to set for ourselves and for them? Boundary is a loving action. A boundary says that, I care about you and I care about our relationship and I want this to work. So therefore, here are the ground rules, right?
Yep.
I want us both to know how to play this game that we are in together. These are the rules of the game. This is what we're going to do. And because I love you, I'm going to set these rules because I want this to work.
Okay, so we touched on this a little bit. So how can we sort of reduce some of that stigma associated with addiction and recovery and kind of create a more supportive environment for those people who are seeking help?
I think it's the separation of person from behavior, I think, is one of the best ways that we can kind of break down, that stigma or that barrier between those things, is instead of labeling the person as, oh, they're an addict, they're an alcoholic, they're a gambler, maybe they're using substance, right? They drink on occasion, separating the behavior from the person.
It's that first person talk, right?
Yeah, being really conscious of the way that we speak to folks, avoiding those labels. Taking a look at the ways that, how have we promoted substance use in our ways of being, right? How do we celebrate our holidays? How do we vacation? How do we exist as a family? How do we exist as a friend group? What are the ways that we have, limited our ways of being together by revolving things around substance, right? So, can we diversify that? Can we add in different things there too? Can we start to share openly about our own personal struggles, right? Even if they're not tied to substance, can we start to talk about, these are the things that I find difficult in my life, and these are the ways that I've maybe not coped well.
Right. Those personal testimonies and stories that we have.
Huge, right? Yeah. That can often open that door, just that inch, right? Which allows the person, the other loved one in our life to say, you know what, me too. And I need something. Yeah.
And that isolation that we feel with any mental health struggles is it's only me. So having that, the personal testimonies from other people, you're not alone, right? Definitely.
You're not alone, and there's nothing wrong with you, right? You are not a bad person, right? You might be struggling and it might feel really heavy and you might feel alone, but there are others out there just like you going through this in a similar way. Again, a testament to that group component, right? That peer group.
Yeah.
There's a reason that it is, touted as the best practice for addiction and for mental health is to be in that group-based setting, right? How do we heal together? Because oftentimes, as professionals, we're not the ones that have the answers. We can nudge people towards the right direction, but that shared affect, that shared testimony of, this is what it actually feels like. This is what I'm going through too, can be huge.
Yeah.
Huge for folks.
Yeah. How then does leadership and role modeling play within that, either context of group therapy or context of how do I then promote this recovery throughout, our college environment?
Well, I think, in any institution-based setting, we need to take a look at policy, right? What are the ways that policy or availability of resources or funding, are we equally giving funding to both substance-based activities as we are to non-substance-based activities? Are we allowing the same level of promotion of different groups as others in here? So again, policy, I think, is always, and is there funding for therapy, right? Do we have availability, just as many academic advisors as we do counseling therapists available, right? If we want folks to be able to, not only thrive in their education, but we also want them to thrive in their mental health, is the availability there for that? Is that functional, right?
Yeah.
So I think from a leadership perspective, I think also from a leadership-based, lens, how are we showing that we are there for others? How are we making it safe for people to talk openly, right? Are we giving that space for that downtime and that conversation, right?
Those are great insights. It's been great listening to your input on addiction recovery and all the things we need to think about. But I think specifically on knowing that we're not alone, knowing that there's connection there for you.
Totally.
And that there's people who care about you, right? And I think when we're talking about any mental health struggles, including addiction, it's the fact that somebody is there to care about you. Regardless of how close you are, somebody will care.
And this doesn't have to be the end,
Yeah.
right? It's just because this is what's going on for you currently in your life, just because this is a current struggle, does not mean you have set yourself up for this to be your forever struggle. You are not alone. There is nothing wrong with you as a person. You are doing nothing wrong. You simply have a maladaptive coping strategy that could use some love and some support and some connection. And I think that's the honor and privilege of my job, is I get to love on people when they feel the most unlovable. And I think that's a pretty cool component to my job. And I get to see, the beauty in folks when they don't see it in themselves at all, right? Yeah. And I think connection, you are not alone. Reach out. That's if you learn anything from this, that's what I hope you hear.
That's good. Any other final thoughts?
Yeah, get curious, I think, is the other big thing. Explore your own questions, get curious, check out what's available in your community, check out what's available at the college, right? Ask those questions. It's also ask of the folks in your lives what you need from them, right? I need you to go learn more about this. I need you to help me better understand this, right? Get curious, be your own scientist, ask your own questions, treat your mental health as just as important as any other component in your life, right? Realizing that recovery is that larger perspective, right? We've got supports available here on the college. We have our recovery group. We'd love to see folks for harm reduction supports and education. We have that available. Naloxone training, that's also available. Again, there's Access South, right, if you're wanting to get connected with Alberta Health Services. And again, all other community resources, they can help you to kind of navigate that. Yeah, reach out.
And the fact that I'm hoping that most colleges and universities throughout Canada have counseling resources and have those counselors on hand that can provide oftentimes free service, which is completely great that students can have access to those things.
Yeah, there's also Recovery on Campus is another cool resource to check out online. They also do have some digital meetings. I'm not sure if they're running them right now, but they do have some digital content that you can connect with because recovery on campus is a big thing, right? And we're starting to realize that. And be an advocate too, right? Yeah. Get involved, right? Even if this is maybe not your own personal journey, but maybe you've got folks in your life who are struggling with addiction, get connected with the student associations, plan things. Right? Ask for what you need. Create the campus that you want to see as well, too. It can't just be one person's fight, right? Everyone needs to be involved.
Well, Kayla, thank you so much for joining us again and sharing your expertise on this topic.
Thanks so much for having me. I've enjoyed this. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's been wonderful. And to our listeners out there, if you or someone you know is dealing with addiction, please remember that help is available and there is a hope for a brighter future. And that's all for our episode of Fearless Journeys. We hope that you found this conversation enlightening and empowering. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, rate, leave a review. All your feedback will really help us to reach more listeners. And please do share this podcast link wherever you go. As always, remember that your journey is important and you're never alone. So stay fearless, everyone.